You're watching the Wellness Hour, news that makes you healthier. I'm Randy Alvarez. This is our podcast edition. And my first guest, and I've heard about him for more than 22 years. I met him and I was starstruck about 18 years ago. And then through his publicist, I finally found him and talked to him. We had a great conversation. But this guy is legitimately America's integrative cardiologist. He is Dr. Steven Sinatra. Dr. Sinatra, welcome to the program.
Oh, Randy, it's great to be here. Thanks for the kind words.
You know, I read your book many years ago, The Cholesterol Myth, that cholesterol was not the number one culprit for heart disease and heart attacks and things like that. But look, you're the guy to watch. I also want to give you a little bit more of an intro because, look, you've been seen, interviewed on the Today Show. Dr. Oz Loves You, CNN, MSNBC, The Doctors, The 700 Club. And you've written lots of books, I guess about a dozen books, New York Times bestseller. And you're not the typical cardiologist, right? So this is a big topic. And so again, thanks for coming on the program. Let's start a little bit with how did you transition from just the traditional cardiologist, maybe as a diagnostician or drugs and surgery, to what you're doing today, where you actually believe in nutrition? How'd you make that change, and when did that happen?
Fortunately, it happened just after I received my boards in cardiovascular disease. I was only 31 years old. I did 5 years of intensive training, spent 2 years in a cardiac cath lab. And one of my patients came in from Ohio, and he asked if I would talk to his doctor, which was a Dr. Jacob Rins from Holland. He was 92 years old. He was a Dutch chemist. And I said, sure, I'll call him. And Randy, it was amazing. My office was full, but I spoke to this 92-year-old PhD, and he said to me over the phone, he goes, "Doctor, I discovered the cure for arthrosclerosis." Now, you got to realize, after going through 5 years of training and becoming certified in cardiology, to hear a PhD Dutch chemist say this, I decided to listen. And then as he's talking about all these nutrients, about phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, magnesium. I didn't even know what he was talking about, Randy. I'm saying, oh, my gosh, this guy is interesting. And then, you know, I thought he was around 50 or 60 at the most. When I asked him his age,
interrupt for a second. We're talking about like hardening of the arteries. This is a guy that said he had a cure for it. Okay, keep going.
So anyway, I thought he was in his 50s or 60s. I said, by the way, Dr. Rins, how old are you? He goes, 92. I go, 92? Wow. And you're that witty and that, you know, sharp? And I said, oh, my gosh. I mean, this is amazing. So after listening to this guy on the telephone at 92 years old, Randy, I listened, I took notes, and I became, you know, an integrative cardiologist on the spot. In other words, I became a conventional cardiologist in recovery at a very early age. Yeah, that's how it started.
So this guy introduced you that food has a major impact on all of this.
Food, supplements, you know, alternative methodologies. And as a result of him, I went into a 2-year Gestalt psychotherapy training program. Then I went into an 8-year bioenergetic psychotherapy training program. Then about 25 years ago, I took the boards from the American College of Nutrition. I studied to be a certified nutrition specialist. Then I took the anti-aging boards given by the A4M. So I became certified in a lot of different specialties.
Dr. Sinatra,
and I'm still learning. Believe me, I go to conferences all the time.
Is it true? You know, I hear this from guys. I hear this at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, which is like the biggest of its kind, and functional medicine doctors from all over the world. And I know you're a speaker there. But is it true they don't teach you much about nutrition in college, in your training as cardiology? Is that really true? Like
Absolutely.
Very little?
Well, actually, medical school. I probably received about a half hour in nutrition, and it all had to do with alcoholism. In other words, what are the needs of an alcoholic? What are the vitamin and mineral needs? And that was a good place, but that was only a half hour in medical school. After that, we were on our own. So basically, I became a nutritionist, through the American College of Nutrition, reading, oh my gosh, dozens and dozens of books, going to lectures, and just, the greatest thing about a doctor, Randy, is it takes decades to learn. The problem is if some of us die before decades, we're in real trouble. But it takes 40 or 50 years to really understand, the methodologies and the theories and what makes people get better, because that's the key. How do you fix people and get them healthy again?
You see reversals in diseases associated with aging Would you say every week in your practice?
Well, when I was practicing, absolutely, yeah. When I was seeing patients on a day-to-day basis, oh, absolutely. In other words, I would see kids come in, parents would be crying in my office. They needed heart transplants. And, these poor children, there weren't hearts available. So I would treat them with my metabolic cardiology. I was treating 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And it was amazing. I have to tell you, when these children developed 10, 15, 20 years later, and then, conventional hospitals would say, oh, we found a heart for you. They would say, I don't want a heart. What I'm doing right now is working. I want to keep my own heart. So, situations like this over and over again, made me a strong believer that I was on the right track when it comes to metabolic cardiology.
Okay. When we talked on the phone, of course, I was really impressed. I was kind of starstruck on the phone. But I kind of wanted to know your philosophy and approach. And you summed it up very simply, and I'm paraphrasing you slightly. But you said, the more I learn, Randy, after all these years of doing this, it's all about food. I'm really about nutrition now. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, when I studied philosophy in college, Hippocrates said, food is thy medicine. I mean, he's absolutely right. Now, look at today. We got GMOs, we got insecticides, pesticides, we've got heavy metals, just permeating the entire environment. So the food supply is toxic. And by the way, the average American takes in about 160 pounds of sugar a year. Now you got sugar on heavy metals, preservatives, toxins, pesticides. Oh my God, BPA, it's unbelievable. And what people need to do is bring healthy, I call it high vibrational food, organic food that's not laced with heavy metals or certainly sugars and stuff like that. You want to bring high vibrating foods to the table. And these foods contain carotenoids and flavonoids and certainly all these constituents that really help heal the human body. And that's the key. They're supportive to our bodies. It raises the vibration of our cells. And whenever you raise your vibration, you're going into health and wellness, and you're getting away from sickness and disease.
I want to start with sugar and heart disease, sugar and COVID right now. But first,
they're connected.
Can you actually take somebody with maybe a 30% blockage in their arteries, maybe in the carotid artery or whatever, and through nutrition and supplementation, can you kind of melt that away? And maybe I'm making it sound too simplistic, but can you do that? Take somebody
Absolutely. Done it many times over time. I mean, when I was studying, it's called EBCT technology, and it's an electron beam where you can go in, you get x-rays to the heart for about 15 minutes, and it lights up all the calcium in your blood vessels. I had that test done on me when I was 50 years old, and fortunately I was a 0. And basically, when it comes to coronary calcium, you don't want that in your coronary vessels, or you certainly don't want it in your brain. But when it comes to coronary calcium, you can regress it. You can take it out. And the way you take it out is with incredible foods. For example, like there's a vitamin called MK2. It's called metoquinone 7. And basically what it does, it takes calcium out of blood vessels where it doesn't belong, and it puts calcium in bones where it does belong. So all these women suffering from osteoporosis or weak bones, they need MK7, metoquinone 7. I learned this, Randy, from 2 Dutch researchers over 20 years ago. They were lecturing at Yale New Haven Hospital. I was a cardiologist in the audience. I ended up taking them out to dinner. Actually twice. And I said, I got to have this stuff. And they came out of the Rotterdam study, and these were doctors, again, from Holland. So that's the beauty of being a doctor. When you learn something and when you're treating hundreds of people a week, you get an idea of what works and what doesn't work. So MK7 is great. You've probably heard about pomegranate and green tea and turmeric and resveratrol. These are all antioxidants that are equally, as good, not as strong as MK7, but the kingpin is metoquinone 7, and you can buy that anywhere, as a vitamin supplement. I mean, it's on the internet.
On your website, you have supplements. So MK7
Correct.
is available to buy on your site as well?
Oh, yeah.
And that's on
Healthy Directions, yeah.
And it's drsinatra.com if we want to
Correct,
go there.
Yeah.
So let's jump in for a moment about sugar. And by the way, on this MK7, you can't throw MK7 at a poor diet. Obviously, they have to be eating right and taking MK7. Okay.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because so many patients get the idea, Randy, that, oh, I'm going to go on a cruise. I take vitamins and minerals. I'm going to eat 6 or 7 times a day and have cakes and pastries and sweets, et cetera, et cetera. All the vitamin and minerals do, the antioxidants you take, it plugs up holes in the diet, because nobody eats the perfect diet unless if you're eating a dozen fresh fruits and vegetables a day that are all organic. So basically, I recommend vitamin and mineral support or antioxidant support to shore up a healthy diet. A healthy diet is number one, and then targeted nutritional supplements is the perfect marriage.
Dr. Sinatra, when you were preaching this 20 years ago, was this considered quackery by many mainstream physicians?
Maybe not quackery, but when I was chief of cardiology, I was also director of medical education. When I was giving lectures, sure, I would have doctors walk out of my lectures. I mean, I have arrows in my back, Randy. I mean, I'll admit that.
You know, we talked on the phone. I remember 22 years ago when I was really getting involved in nutrition, interviewing medical doctors, these integrative medicine doctors, and cardiologists. I had somebody from a famous hospital on my show, and we talked about CoQ10 when you were taking a statin or Lipitor. And they said, well, there's no evidence, there's no proof of CoQ10. And then eventually they finally seemed to come around, it seems like about 15 years ago, where, okay, if you're taking a statin, take CoQ10. But if you're not, CoQ10 might be worthless. And now it is amongst cardiologists, now they're the experts on CoQ10. Could you talk a little bit about that? And did you always see it as a good thing to do?
Well, it's an interesting question. You know, again, when I was chief of cardiology, I used to lecture for Merck and Pfizer, and I used to believe in the statins until there was an article that came out. Actually, it was in the Indian literature in India, you know, in Asia. It came out in the 1990s, and it said that statin drugs are incredible cholesterol killers, but the coenzyme Q10 pathway is on that metabolic pathway. So when you lower cholesterol, you lower endogenous CoQ10 in the body as well. And Randy, when I read this paper, you know, being a CoQ10 guy, I met all the CoQ10 researchers, Carl Folkers, you know, Bliznikov, all these guys. And I was a disciple of CoQ10. The minute I read that, I said, wait a minute, how can something be good for the heart, be bad for the heart at the same time? These statins are killing CoQ10, the most important thing you need for the heart. I immediately, Randy, stopped lecturing for the drug companies because I said something's wrong with this whole picture. I did my own research, wrote my own editorials in the medical literature. And again, I just started using alternative ways of treating cholesterol in patients. But I will say this, a low-dose statin, like 5 or 10 milligrams, maybe 4 or 5 times a week, They do lower cholesterol, but the way they really work, and I want your viewers to understand this, statins are potent blood thinners. And right now in the 21st century, our blood is like red ketchup. It's like thick. Statins thin the blood. Statins also are powerful antioxidants. So, you know, they can do some good things, particularly in young men under the age of 75. So if they do have a little coronary disease, I'll recommend a low dose, maybe 4 or 5 times a week. I don't like them in women. I certainly don't like them in children. And I don't like statins over the age of 75 because they can interfere with memory. Because remember, you need cholesterol for your brain. You need cholesterol for cognition. It's vitally important. So when you drop cholesterol, you know, a lot of these patients over the age of 75 suffer from, you know, memory considerations.
Okay, so with this low dose, 5 milligram, you mentioned, I don't know, what's like a regular dose of a statin?
60 to 80 sometimes.
So 60 to 80. And so the 3
40,
to 4, is the 3 to 4 only for people that have showed that, you know that they have a percentage of blockage?
Yes. In other words, if you have documented coronary artery disease, you have blockages in your coronary vessels, I have no problem giving a low-dose statin to a young male under the age of 75 with coenzyme Q10, though. I want to stipulate that. I'll always administer a very low-dose statin with coenzyme Q10. Okay.
I have a stack of papers here with questions for you, but I want to start with sugar and heart disease, okay? It's become popular, I guess. The word on the street, people know that kind of sugar is bad. Maybe high-carb diets are not great. Why is sugar, how is it connected to cholesterol? How is it connected to eventually ending up with a bad heart?
The question about sugar is very simple. Whenever you take in sugar, and the average American now takes in 160 pounds a year. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in our carbohydrate foods. It's in candy, sodas. I mean, it's pervasive. But sugar elicits an insulin response. And over the last 10 to 20 years, the medical profession has finally understood that insulin, when it's released in the response to sugary meals, insulin is the most pro-inflammatory hormone on what we call the endothelial layer of blood vessels. So when you take in sugar and you're secreting packets and packets of insulin, you're creating insidious inflammation of those very small linings of blood vessels, and that creates more inflammation, and then it creates plaque buildup over time, and that's how it starts. So the best way, cholesterol is not going to give you heart disease. I mean, that's why I wrote The Great Cholesterol Myth, and I still believe it. I mean, cholesterol may give you that much of heart disease, but sugar will give you this much. I mean, sugar.
And by the way, can we define sugar? Because I have conversations where people say, I don't have sugar, but yet they're eating Cheerios with skim milk. So
yeah, that's sugar. That's a carbohydrate. Milk has milk fat in it, but any carbohydrate. I'm from Italian descent, and I like pastas, but you can get high protein pastas. You can get high protein pastas with 10 to 15 or 20 grams of protein per serving. That's like having a small sirloin steak. The secret to eating is more healthy fats like olive oil. Olive oil is the secret sauce of the Mediterranean diet. There's no doubt about it, because there's more 100-year-old people in the Mediterranean basin, plus 100-year-old people in the entire world. So if you eat healthy proteins and healthy fats, and you limit your sugars and you can limit your carbohydrates, that's the Mediterranean style of eating. And that's why the Mediterranean diet is the healthiest diet in the world.
So you eat bread, you eat pasta, and blood sugar goes up. Insulin kind of controls a little bit of blood sugar. So insulin is the problem. So if you control your insulin with diet, you're at least headed the right direction. Is that
correct? Correct. In other words, the less sugar you eat, the less insulin you're going to secrete. And remember this, when you're eating healthy fats and you're eating proteins, that does not elicit an insulin response, Randy. It's the carbohydrates that elicit insulin, and especially the highly processed sugars, like we mentioned. But look, I don't want to throw all sugars under the bus. For example, dark chocolate, cocoa, which has like a dark chocolate configuration of 70 to 80%. I like dark chocolate. Why? Because the polyphenols in chocolate are fantastic for heart healing. They lower blood pressure. They do the opposite that white sugar does.
So we know what polyphenols. Those are these plant chemicals.
Yes.
That are found like in the cocoa bean or whatever. That do what for the body?
Well, they protect the body. In other words, these flavonoids and carotenoids in fresh fruits and vegetables, or the flavonoids in chocolate, they have a protective effect on the body. And the chocolate has this profound effect on blood pressure lowering, like I mentioned. I mean, it's just enormous. So when it comes to taking sweets in the diet, you just got to be productive without being self-destructive at the same time. You have to choose wisely. And that's why I like small pieces of dark chocolate. If somebody wants to use like sugar in their coffee and says, Dr. Sinatra, I can't have a cup of coffee without a couple of tablespoons of sugar. You know what I say to him, Randy? I say, well, look, why don't you use like a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of maple syrup? I mean, maple syrup, at least you're going to get some antioxidants in there. And so, you're going to get health promoting aspects, as opposed to white table sugar, which are just dead calories, just totally dead.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is, wouldn't it be better off with stevia?
Well, stevia is okay, but a lot of people react to stevia. They can get loose bowels from stevia. I've seen that many times because I use stevia. Oh, yeah, I've used stevia for years. I mean, there's about 5 or 10% of the population that doesn't react well with stevia.
But if somebody's trying to lose weight or has extra body fat, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like the last thing they're going to want to have is maple syrup, pure sugar.
Well, again, when it comes to maple syrup, less is more. And maple syrup is a natural sugar. And again, I'm only talking about a teaspoon. I'm not talking about, large amounts of maple syrup. If you have to.
That means that's only if you have to have it.
Yes.
Okay.
You see, as a doctor, Randy, we don't want to pull away everything from a patient, because then they'll just go the opposite. You got to choose your battles wisely with patients. In other words, you can't take away everything. You know what I mean? There's certain pleasures people do and people have. And as a psychotherapist, you don't want to kill those pleasures. You just got to coach them along the way. And listen, when these people start losing weight and feeling better and blood pressure goes down, they're all in. They're all in with me.
So your goal then is to kind of taper them off things that are harmful to them. Toxic
Correct.
chemicals, foods that are bad, carbohydrate foods, things like that.
Correct.
Okay, let's talk about COVID and heart disease, because COVID, you told me this, or not COVID and heart disease, I meant to say sugar.
Sugar?
On our conversation, you said, oh, during COVID, you do not want sugar. And let's kind of make sure that people get, because a lot of the audience, they're not putting two and two together, that carbohydrates, like whether, are sugar, right?
Correct.
Also, so why is sugar so bad when you're trying to boost your immune system and protect yourself against COVID?
Well, what sugar does is if you have a high sugary meal, or let's say a bottle of Coca-Cola or a soda, or, it's lots of ice cream or cooked candies, donuts. I mean, the list goes on and on. Just let's say sugar. What sugar does, Randy, it stifles. In other words, it inhibits your white blood cell activity. We need killer white cells to combat COVID-19. We need these white cells to engulf bacteria or viruses, or to combat these, these pathogens that enter our body. Sugar makes those phagocytosis type of white blood cells, that activity, it puts a blanket on it. It stifles it for at least 2 or 3 hours. So that's why these high sugary meals are not good during a pandemic.
So you need white blood cells to fight off problems, cancer,
you need your killer cells to fight off. Absolutely. You need these killer cells to help neutralize these bacteria and viruses that are pervasive in the environment.
And sugar blunts the production?
It blunts it. Yes, it blunts their response. It blunts what we call that in other words, the engulfing activity. The white blood cell can engulf the bacteria or the virus and kill it, basically. But sugar inhibits it. So it's very important for your listeners to realize that during a pandemic, weight gain. I mean, look at the comorbidities. What's the two major comorbidities with COVID-19 are overweight status and diabetes. So when you have overweight status and you have a lot of fat around your belly, remember these inflammatory cytokines, these inflammatory mediators, they live in fat cells. So if you take away the fat cells, or if you reduce weight, now you're reducing the amount of inflammation in your body. And we all know, the doctors know now that when we lock into the COVID, virus, so to speak, it locks into the ACE2 receptor into the lung. And when that occurs, then we're in trouble. We're in double handcuffs. To help prevent that, we need a more robust immune system. We certainly need less weight to carry, less inflammation in the body, and certainly you don't want to take in inflammatory foods like these high sugary carbohydrates.
Now, I want to hear your stance. So, somebody listening to this, because people are going to be watching this and they're going to self-diagnose. Okay, I got to get my MK7. I got to do this and that. I got to get my CoQ10. But as far as carbs, let's talk about the guys that kind of really gave carbs a bad name, like Dr. Atkin, right? On the Atkin diet, to be in ketosis, it was 5 milligrams of carbs per sitting, to try not to exceed that. And now some of the keto experts are saying maybe 10 to 20 grams of carbs per sitting, and over 2 meals, maybe 3 meals without snacks. Where do you stand on, or about how many carbs per sitting at one time? And I guess, it depends on how much olive oil you're having with it, et cetera. That's what you told me.
Well, that's important. That's the thing, Randy. That's the key. If you have a healthy fat with those carbs at the same time, now you're neutralizing the carbs with a healthy fat. So that's why I like olive oil as a condiment. For example, every night I make a salad. I'd say at least 6 out of 7 nights. And in the salads, I'll use lettuce, I'll use avocados, I'll use onions, I'll add raspberries, blueberries, organic strawberries sometimes, blackberries, and with onions and garlic. And then you can buy these packages which have kale and cabbage and, carrots, they're all chopped up and organic to begin with. So if you can eat a salad that has 12 to 15 fresh fruits and vegetables, you're getting all the carotenoids, all the flavonoids, and you're getting some of the simple sugars in those fruits that I don't worry about. And if you add olive oil onto that salad, now you got the perfect Mediterranean meal going forward, especially with avocado, because avocado brings a lot of liver healing to the table. It supports glutathione, another incredible, immune enhancing antioxidant. So if people eat a lot of fresh salads with all these constituents I mentioned, that's a quick and easy way of getting all these carotenoids and flavonoids in the body.
Can you go 2 tablespoons of olive oil to 1, like maybe red vinegar or something, or apple cider vinegar? What's your recipe?
I would go 4 to maybe a quarter teaspoon or a half a teaspoon of vinegar, really. I would overwhelmingly use the olive oil. You know why, Randy? Even a Premed study that looked at almost 8,000 participants over a 5-year time, the participants that took in 4 tablespoons of olive oil a day had less Alzheimer's, less cancer, less heart disease, less diabetes. And the standard diet was the American Heart Association diet. That was a control. So having 4 tablespoons of olive oil per day, this nice healthy fat and extra virgin olive oil, protected these almost 8,000 people over a period of 5 years. An amazing study. And anybody can read it. It's called the Premed study.
How many do you have?
I have a dozen journals.
I have 8 tablespoons of olive oil a day, and it controls my appetite. I learned about this 4 years ago.
Well, look how thin you are. Look at you. You're
I'm
like
pretty lean. My abs are short.
You're good.
But how many do you have? Like, how many tablespoons? You're saying 4, but do you have 6 or 8 or what?
I have like 4 to 8. I go through a bottle of olive oil. I mean, we use California olive oil because the California olive oils, they're all organic. And the reason why I use a California is some of the olive oils, and you've probably heard about this over 60 Minutes, over the last 5 years, the olive oils in Europe, many of them are cut with canola oil. Now, look, canola oil is good for machines, but it's not good for the body. And the problem with some of the European oils is that if you have 75% extra virgin olive oil on the label can say 100% extra virgin olive oil. So at Vervana, my little food company, we only use California because in order to get the California Growers Council certification, in order to get that certification, you have to go through a chemical test and a taste test to make sure that your olive oil is 100% extra virgin.
Okay, you sent me a bottle of your olive oil, and I took a tablespoon, and it tastes pretty good. They say if
a little pepper taste to it.
Yes,
have a little peppery.
They say
to make it cough.
Yeah, no, because I take a lot of olive oil, but it had a taste to it. They say that if your olive oil has taste, that it's alive. Is this true too?
Or if it makes you cough. If you take a tablespoon and you go, you cough. I like that because that's the polyphenols in it that's protecting you.
Okay,
those are the anti-aging. Oh, and let me say this, Randy, about olive oil because you're on it. There was a study about 10 years ago, and it showed that if you took in olive oil, all of us have pro-inflammatory genes. We're born with pro-inflammatory genes. The Biogenome Project, where they deciphered our DNA, with 3 Nobel laureates won it. One was from the United States. That project showed that we all have inflammation in the body. We all have these genes. But what olive oil does, this is amazing. It can take pro-inflammatory genes and turn them back to a non-inflammatory state. And that's why I think that more 100-year-old people live in the Mediterranean basin because the common denominator is olive oil. Whether you eat lamb or whether you eat avocados or, you're using lemons from a tree, it doesn't matter. Or if you're adding fish to your diet, the Mediterranean cultures use olive oil, whether it's Moroccan or Italy, or it doesn't matter. But those cultures, have outlived their counterparts by 8 years.
You told me, you said, I don't know, this was your theory. I think you said this on our phone call, that the Mediterranean diet, you don't know if it's the way their food is or the vegetables they were eating. You think maybe it's just the olive oil that's
I think it's the olive oil
that's doing the trick. Really?
Yeah, so, the olive oil and also the way they live over there. When I wrote my book, Heartbreak and Heart Disease, I'll never forget this, Randy. I was looking at the island of Crete. You ever hear of the island of Crete inside the Mediterranean Sea?
Heard about
it's an island. It's a big island. Well, over a 10-year period, they had not one case of a heart attack. Think about that.
Really?
That blew me away as a heart specialist. For 10 years, there wasn't one recorded heart attack on the whole island. Now, that's amazing. And I was giving a lecture, and there was a person from Crete in the audience. And when I mentioned that in the audience, he came up to me and he says, do you know why, Dr. Sinatra, there were no heart attacks in Greece? I go, no, why? He goes, it's our diet, it's this, it's that. But he says, men talk to one another. We have a lunch together for 2 or 3 hours. We talk about our feelings. We talk about our families. We don't talk about work. We don't talk about money. We play chess together. We let down together. Sometimes we even cry together. When I heard that, Randy, I said, oh, my God, that's the Mediterranean way of living. where, people can tell the truth about themselves. And when I heard that as a psychotherapist, it made all the sense to me, because as well as I know, the physical factors of heart disease and diet's important, but emotional factors are equally important as well.
You told me your agenda is healthy eating.
Yes.
Is that hard for some people to take? It's like, it's kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Barbara Bush syndrome. It's a funny, like, see, when Barbara Bush, she was married to, the first George Bush.
Right.
And she looked like his mother. That's what the media, and this was written by a publicist. And they said that the story is that Barbara Bush, because she was making him look older by looking like his mother, they said, we got to, change the way she looks and dresses. So they had a meeting, and she sits there and she says, okay, I know why you're here. I'm going to do whatever you want me to do, but I'm not going to change my hair color. I'm not going to change the way I dress. I'm not going to wear makeup, but I'll do whatever you want. Right? It's like, that was the main thing she needed to change. Do you think that's like some of your patients or patients across the country? It's like, look, I don't mind taking the MK7. I don't mind doing the CoQ10. But look, if you're going to try to tell me that I got to eat, lean protein and low glycemic vegetables and lots of olive oil, I don't know if I'm willing to live that boring lifestyle. Respond to that, because I hear that a lot.
It's a very good point. And Randy, as a doctor, we don't want to, take away a patient's power. The best doctors are the ones that meet their patients halfway. They'll recognize their needs. They'll recognize their taboos. They'll recognize their weaknesses. They'll recognize their strengths. And in that process, there's a conversation going on between the doctor and the healer. And if the doctor with a healer can meet the patient in a situation where they can give up certain things without complaints, follow the instructions. The key is you want to empower your patient to do things on their own. You don't want to tell them what to do. You want them to see it that, I'm a heart specialist. This is my business. If you eat these certain foods, yes, the incidence of heart disease goes up. Yes, arrhythmia goes up. Higher blood pressure goes up, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, your patient, becomes your partner. You've got to partner with your patient. You've got to involve that patient, because you're right. Certain patients have habits. They won't change. And the good doctor will recognize that. Once the doctor tells the patient what to do over and over again, goodbye, it's over. It's over. I mean, as a psychotherapist, I can tell you that. It's unbelievable.
I can't wait to ask you this question. So does it frustrate you, or at least what goes through your mind? You see a commercial where heart healthy Cheerios, right? Now, I'm in advertising. So I know that I think legally they can say it's heart healthy because it has a little bit of fiber in there. And fiber is good for the heart. So that way they're legally able to say that. But can you give me your strong opinion about Cheerios and good for your heart?
Well, the other thing about Cheerios, Cheerios are a carbohydrate. They do have fiber, but there were studies done on oatmeal, for example. Now, oatmeal has a lot of fiber. You can see it. It's not processed, so to speak. But there's studies on oatmeal that shows lowering of blood pressure and lowering of cardiovascular risk factors. So sometimes companies can take big steps, so to speak. A little research comes in and they may exaggerate it a little bit. But if a patient came to me and says, Dr. Sinatra, I got to have my Cheerios. I saw these advertisements on television. You know what I would say to him, Randy? I said, okay, if you want to use your Cheerios, just use lots of fresh fruits on those Cheerios. Use organic blueberries, raspberries, or strawberries. Use these organic fruits on those Cheerios. Yeah, use less sugar. In fact, don't even use any table sugar at all. Don't even sweeten it, because the Cheerios do have a sweetener to them as well. In the carbohydrate. And so, in other words, if you can modify the dish that a patient wants to eat by not making it taboo, then you're doing your job as a clinician or a physician.
But
in other words, you're giving them a healthier choice.
But if they said, Doc, I could live without Cheerios, would you just say, then just wipe it out? Because it has gluten.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of problems.
Gluten, sure. Well, oats don't really have the gluten unless the oats are processed in the gluten facility. I mean, what you're saying, Randy, is so important. I went to the New York Health Show. at the Javits Center for the last few years. Well, not recently because of COVID, because, you know, I'm in the food business, and I walked acres and acres with these, quote, healthy foods. And I got to tell you, I walked in these organic sections, and I was finding arrows in these foods. I said, wait a minute, there's sugar in here, there's preservatives. How can I call this organic? So, you know, a lot of people use this nomenclature, you know, loosely. So the most important thing for patients is to read these labels carefully. Just read them carefully. And, you know, that's what I tell them to do. Because you're right. You said it at the beginning of the broadcast. Healthy food is the challenge of the 21st century. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, good. Now, if somebody is new, this is new to them, some of the things you're saying, of all the books you've written, what's a good starter book for them to learn more about this on their own?
Kind of an interesting question. I would say Health Revelations from Heaven. I did that with Tommy Rosa. This was an interesting guy. I met him about 7 or 8 years ago. He was run over by a truck. He went to heaven and back. And Randy, look, I was a cath cardiologist. I did thousands of angiograms. I was in the CCU, ICU for years. I've treated more heart attacks than you can shake a stick at. And in that process, I had about 20 life after death situations where patients told me after I resuscitated them, brought them back to life. I've heard mostly 90% of my stories were very good. I went through the tunnel. I was floating over the ceiling, doctor. I saw you working on me. I was praying that you would bring me back. I mean, I've heard a couple of bad stories too. I mean, I had a Marine, for example, that died on a racquetball court in his 30s, and we brought him back 3 times. And he had a horrific life after death experience where he saw flames. He saw, you know, these dark shadows and a hooded man. And I'm convinced that, you know, it wasn't a good life after death experience. But I can tell you this, in my book, Heaven and Earth, what Tommy did for me when he went to heaven was he validated a lot of the things that I was preaching on earth, he learned in heaven. So even about CoQ10 and about metabolic cardiology, he learned about mitochondria in heaven. I mean, he was a plumber. He didn't know about mitochondria. Really? Yeah, but spiritual healers inculcated into his brain all his scientific stuff. So when Tommy came back, my God, he knew as much about medicine than the doctors I met. So, you know, when it comes to spirituality, and I know this could be a leap for a lot of people, but I will tell you this, as a heart specialist, I'm convinced that, you know, we live in a physical body. We have emotional factors in our life, and many of us are spiritual at the same time. Now, why do people get sick, Randy? Why do they get sick? I think one of the reasons why, when I say sick, I'm talking deathly ill, you know, strokes, heart attacks, cancer, stuff like that. A lot of these people, they get on the road less traveled, so to speak. In other words, they get out of their spiritual, emotional, and physical plane. There's a disconnect there. And Randy, you're going to think I'm nuts. You're going to think I'm crazy.
Okay.
But after speaking to Tommy, I think sometimes the angels put a catastrophic illness in our path to get us back on the road, better traveled. In other words, a woman's told me this in the office. She was married to a board-certified oncologist. She developed her own breast cancer. She didn't want to take chemotherapy. And I asked her, I said, why do you think cancer was placed in your path? I just asked her the question. You know what she said to me?
What?
She says, there's something I have to learn now. I know cancer was placed in my path because I have to do something about my life. See, that's an intuitive thought. And sure enough, she did something about her life, and she beat her cancer at the same time.
Well, you
got to realize that sometimes illnesses are placed there for a reason.
So as a cardiologist, somebody gets, let's say, a heart attack and they survive, right?
Yes.
They have this come to Jesus moment, right? Where they, like what you're talking about. Maybe it showed up in their life at the right time as a wake-up call. Is that kind of what we're talking about there? That maybe it's a humiliating or humbling experience to when you're faced with death.
Absolutely. You know, when I was working in the insurance capital of the world, when I was at St. Francis Hospital, we had a lot of the top insurance executives and Pratt & Whitney. I mean, and you know, all these institutions in Hartford, like the Hartford Insurance and things like that, Connecticut General. Randy, I got to tell you, when I saw young men in their 30s and early 40s with heart attacks, I would walk in the CCU. And I would ask them, I would say, you know, why do you think you got this heart attack, Jim? And you know what they would say? A lot of these guys would say to me, Doc, I'm in the wrong job. I know I'm in the wrong job. Some guys would say, Doc, I'm in the wrong marriage. My marriage is killing me. And guess what? A lot of these environmental factors. I had one guy that's son kept on getting in trouble with the police, and he was getting so annoyed about it. He developed a heart attack. So in other words, people got to realize that, a heart attack, can be a reawakening that you need to do something about your life. Because emotional stress, as a therapist and as a heart specialist, I know emotional stress trumps everything when it comes to heart disease.
Okay, we're going to skip around a little bit. I'm going to ask, because I know you have 6 pillars of health, and I want to get to those, but I want to talk about, for the sake of time, the power of coenzyme Q10, even on preventing glaucoma and reversing glaucoma, because you gave me a CoQ10 speech when we were on the phone. I couldn't order it fast enough, right?
Oh,
and even though I've been taking it, I think I was taking the wrong form. And then also I want to talk about fish oils, how much, what your thoughts are. I want to talk about grounding, where you're supposed to walk on the earth without shoes.
My favorite.
That's pretty wild. And then stress. I want you to define, because most people think stress is worry, especially my tough guy friends that are CEOs. But stress could be looking at your phone. Stress could be not sleeping enough. Stress could be, I guess, drinking too much coffee. I don't know. You'll define it for us. So let's start with coenzyme Q10. Okay, so you're eating an anti-inflammatory diet, as outlined in your books. Now the supplements, CoQ10. What's so good about it?
CoQ10 is amazing. I mean, let's look at the pandemic, for example. I mean, we know that inflammatory cytokines, or these inflammatory messages, overwhelm the body, and they can lock into these ACE2 receptors in the lung, and we get hemorrhage in the lung, hemorrhage in the brain. I mean, this virus is very, very deadly. There's no question. But one thing about CoQ10 does, it combats or it resists inflammatory mediators like interleukin-6 or C-reactive protein, or NF-kappa B. So in other words, as scientists, we know that CoQ10 prevents these inflammatory mediators from skyrocketing. It also supports endothelial function at the same time. And we talked about that a little previously, where it supports the basement membrane of these blood vessels, where you get less hemorrhage, because the reason why you get hemorrhage in these blood vessels is you get endothelial cell dysfunction. So I'm all in when it comes to CoQ10. And what I told you a couple of weeks ago is I gave a lecture at the A4M a few months ago, and I did a literary research on recent CoQ10 periodicals. And I got this article from November, only about 3 or 4 months ago. And Randy, I've been using CoQ10 for almost 50 years. I mean, I've written hundreds of, well, not hundreds, but maybe 60 periodicals, books, comments, editorials on CoQ10. And I didn't know CoQ10 combated glaucoma. I didn't know this.
How? Do they know the mechanism?
Yeah, the mechanism is it supports the retinal ganglion. In other words, it supports the nerve fibers coming out of the retina. And I didn't know this because my mother and grandmother both went blind from glaucoma. So I have glaucoma in my family genetics. And, it's interesting. My 2 sisters and my brother, who've been taking CoQ10 for 3 decades, I've been taking CoQ10 for almost 50 years or 40 years. I had my cataracts done the other day, and they've checked me for glaucoma. I'm fine. It's just amazing. And I think it's because I've been taking CoQ10 for decades. So I was shocked when I found out that CoQ10 could resurrect glaucoma. I mean, that's amazing.
Now, the CoQ10 you recommend, because I guess the studies are based on the one that ends in an ONE. I'm not even sure how to pronounce it.
Right.
What is it?
Ubiquinone.
Ubiquinone.
There's ubiquinol out there, but like the drug companies, unfortunately, some of the nutraceutical companies fall prey to this, to this, hyper advertising hype. They say that ubiquinol is better than ubiquinone. It's not true. I mean, if you have a good quality ubiquinone where you get good blood levels of CoQ10, why spend an extra $10 to $25 a month when you don't have to? That's the way I look at it. Now, I will say this. Can ubiquinol have a better affinity in a very young child that has what we call congenital inborn errors of metabolism? These are very, very rare diseases where perhaps you might need an extra energetic boost by having a reduced CoQ10 in your blood serum, like a ubiquinol? I don't know the answer to that, but for my patients and myself, I take ubiquinone because it's been proven in clinical studies. I haven't seen one good clinical study on ubiquinol showing its efficacy as opposed to ubiquinone. So I take ubiquinone every day.
And the CoQ10 you take with food. I think you told me the dose you like is 100 milligrams. But if you're taking a statin, you may want 200 milligrams. And do you separate it?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, if you have high blood pressure, see, I'm sort of a healthy guy. I think I am. I mean, nobody's really healthy. You don't know, but I take 100 milligrams of CoQ10 a day. Now, if I had memory problems or high blood pressure or diabetic problems or liver dysfunction, like CoQ10 is outstanding for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is, running through the United States right now. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that they have fatty livers. And a fatty liver, by the way, is not good for COVID-19. But CoQ10 fixes that. CoQ10 is a great antidote for, when you have too much fat in your liver. And it doesn't have to be from alcohol. It can be from, toxins and preservatives in the environment. So everybody, Brandy, should be taking CoQ10. I'm telling you, to me, this is the number one nutrient. You know why? Because it's a mitochondrial support. And it's the mitochondrial theory of aging that I really connected with. I was the only one at the A4M 25 years ago that preached the mitochondrial theory of aging. All my colleagues were preaching hormones, testosterone, estrogen, growth hormone, all this stuff. Melatonin's good. I like melatonin. But when it comes to mitochondria, and now there's been over 10,000 papers in the literature sort of stating my belief 20 years ago that supporting mitochondria is really the key to anti-aging medicine, and CoQ10 will do that. So
the mitochondria are the energy cells? What are they?
They're the little factories in our cells that produce ATP. In other words, they're ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is our chi energy. We only have 8 seconds of it. We make it all the time, and we make it from the foods we eat. And CoQ10 is vital in that because it's an electron donor in the process of making ATP, or the energy of life. The Indians may call it chi or prana. The Hebrews may call it the breath of God, or, things like that. In other words, it's chi, it's our energy. And, even the Russian, the German war criminals during World War II, remember they would take cyanide? Okay. Cyanide interrupts the Krebs cycle within seconds. In other words, cyanide cuts off all your metabolic machinery, and that's why you die quickly. You may convulse and you can't breathe. For some people, it'll be a very quick death. For some people, it may not be, but it's usually within a couple of minutes to seconds. But what cyanide does is it just knocks out the whole metabolic machinery where you don't produce ATP, and coenzyme Q10 is vital for producing ATP, or again, the energy of life.
Okay, and for the people tuning in that we're talking about heart, we're talking about reversing heart disease, we're talking about metabolic cardiology, but and this is a big topic but I want people to know, because they might say, but what about the gut? What about leaky gut? What about all of those things? I know you could talk for hours on these topics, so you got to heal the gut, you got to do all those things. We're making assumptions here. Okay, so CoQ10, big fan. Number 2, fish oils.
Love
How much?
Fish oil.
What do you do?
Well, years ago, I used to use fish oil until I realized from some of the companies I was ordering from, they were using a lot of big fish. And I worry about contamination in the oceans, certainly Fukushima and, all the garbage in the oceans the oceans, unfortunately, are getting more and more toxic. So I went from fish oil to calamari oil. Calamari comes from small squid. I visited Norway. I went through the facilities, and these facilities, Randy, you can eat off the floor. The stainless steel was unbelievable. The cleanliness was incredible. And the reason why I like calamari oil is these squids are only about this big. They're like the size of 2 fists, so to speak. And they only live in the ocean for about 450 days. And they're harvested. And the calamari oil is like a fish oil, but it has more DHA in it. DHA is what we call docosahexaenoic acid. And DHA is better for the brain, the retina of the eye, and the heart, as well as the skin. Now, EPA is also part of fish oil. We call it eicosapentaenoic acid. That's found in krill oil, for example. That's good if you have arthritis or, inflammation of the small joints. So as a heart specialist, I'm more involved with the heart, which DHA is really part of the heart, the brain, and the retina of the eye. So basically, the reason why I went to squid oil over the last, maybe a dozen years, the reason why I switched over is they're environmentally much safer. They get to the target organs that I want to address as a heart specialist. And you don't need much. You only need about 1 to 2 grams a day to make a difference. So it's inexpensive and it's heart healthy at the same time.
So that's about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of DHA a day. But tell me this. So the whole idea is you don't want fish oil that you might get at Costco or whatever that are from big fish, because those big fish are eating a bunch of garbage in the ocean. All the little fish,
they're full of mercury. Remember this: the bigger the fish, the more the mercury.
Okay, so krill oil, I thought, lots of questions here, but so krill oil, you're saying it's kind of low in DHA. Is that why you don't? Because they're
low.
small.
Oh yeah. Okay. It's mostly EPA. Yeah.
So this other oil, and you offer that on your website.
I offer Calamarine. Yeah, I'm all in on Calamarine.
Now, what about like somebody like me that orders from these professional brands, like let's say Designs for Health, or these different companies that they claim that it's pretty pure? Is it okay to get your fish oil there? At some of these professional brands that are tested?
I don't know the answer to that question, Randy. I mean, I will tell you this. I mean, I've been a doctor for almost 50 years. I'm going to go into my 50th medical school reunion next year. Wow. I hope, with COVID, And like one of the things that I learned early on as a physician is do no harm. Do no harm. And when I started to work with Healthy Directions almost 30 years ago, I was making my own vitamin and mineral formulations before I joined Healthy Directions, but I had control over what I did. In other words, I don't want, anything bad in those ingredients, so to speak. In other words, I don't want any toxins. I don't want, any garbage in there. And basically, when it comes to vitamin and mineral supplements, you want a good quality assurance program. And when I started to work with Healthy Directions, I made that my most important priority. I wanted an incredible quality assurance because I recommend these products to people and I want to sleep at night. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that I'm helping people. And, even if you help, 999 out of 1,000, I mean, one person may not improve on vitamin and mineral or targeted nutritional supplementation, that happens, but you certainly don't want to do any harm. So on all my products, I do a lot of diligence on my products. So I really can't answer for other companies.
Now, the guy that wrote the book, The Zone, Barry Sears, I had him on the show. And I asked him the question. I go, I have a son. My son's 19, but he was about 15 at the time. I said, how much fish oil should I give my son? And his response, which I loved, he said, it just depends on how smart you want your son to be. And it was a clever one-liner. He's a great communicator. But for parents watching this, because kids aren't probably going to watch this, what do you say to them about fish oil and children? And I want you to, there's this whole thing where EPA versus, if you have too much olive oil, you throw off the balance of omega-6, omega-3. I guess it's a few questions in there.
The simple answer to the question is you want to limit omega-6 as much as you can. Now, look, black currant seed oil is an omega-6. I do like it. In fact, I like that for arthritis. Even primrose oil is okay. I like those. But very few. Canola oil is out completely. I mean, just out. Safflower oil, unless if it's expeller, that has an advantage. But I like omega-3s. I mean, omega-3s are healthy. And the beauty about omega-3s is you do not need a lot of them. I mean, even 1 to 2 grams a day can make a huge difference. I mean, look at the study that was done in Europe years ago by Dr. Delorgeril, this French cardiologist. They showed that 1 gram of omega-3 essential fatty acids in a high-risk population can prevent sudden death. I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, that's just like 1 gram. And look, these omega-3s, they get inside the plaque, if you do have plaque, and they make the plaque more resistant to plaque rupture. In other words, the it's harder for the plaque to rupture because the omega-3 gets inside and it makes that plaque resistant to rupture, because you don't want to get plaque rupture, whether it's from emotional stress or heavy exertion or anything like that, because when a plaque ruptures, then you can get a heart attack. So
does olive oil do a little bit of that?
I love olive oil and omega-3s to me.
But does that do a little bit? I've heard some guys, in fact, one guy's a thoracic surgeon, very famous. He does a commercial. It's like advertising.
Oh, Dr. Grundy. Yeah, I know Dr. Grundy.
Yeah, but he said it's like when you drink olive oil all the time, that it's like nothing sticks to your arteries. It just slides right off. Is that a bit of an overstatement?
Well, I mean, that's probably an overstatement. I mean, look, olive oil can make very injurious small particle LDL a little more fluffier, which is good. It can make your HDL even fluffier, which is good. Olive oil has a good impact on blood lipids. There's no doubt about it. But again, I think olive oil works on those pro-inflammatory genes, like I said before. I mean, olive oil lowers blood pressure. It has that good impact on blood sugar. It has a great impact on the cholesterol, constituents. But when you talk genetics, that's the real kingpin, I think.
Now, I don't want to go off in this genetic direction, but what do you say to those people that say, but Randy, I took the 23andMe. I have these markers that I'm more likely to get Alzheimer's, like the APO4 or 3, yeah. Or they say that, my genetics say that I'm more likely to have heart disease. Do you think with proper eating, you could change this gene expression or have a real impact, that maybe it doesn't matter about your genes, that it matters about what's going in your mouth?
Let me say it simply. Environment trumps genes. Period. In other words, if you're dealt a bad set of genes, you can find a doctor that will plug up those holes and give you nutritional supports to overwhelm the amount of insecurity you have with, quote, bad genes. It's that simple. Environment trumps genetics. That's the key. And look, Randy, what are the doctors of the future going to be like? They're not going to be like me, looking at differential diagnosis. Somebody comes in with chest pain. Oh, is it an aneurysm? Is it musculoskeletal? Is it a heart? Is it a blood clot to the lung? They're going to do that. But if they come in with a complex patient, you know what they're going to do? They're going to get their genetic profile. And they're going to see these holes in the genetic profile. And they're going to say, oh, that's easy. I'll just plug that up with this, or I'll plug with it, maybe a drug, maybe a nutrient, maybe a diet. But the doctors of the future, they're not going to have it like I had it. The Biogenome Project that was discovered in 1993, it takes 20 to 30 years for this stuff to really, surface. Like it took Coenzyme Q10 almost 50 years to really reach the surface. I got to tell you, I feel very bright about the future of medicine, because I think these new doctors are going to be all over these genetic profiles, and they're going to give you remedies.
So you'll take some sort of a genetic test, and then a doctor can prescribe the nutritional therapies based on your blood work, the supplements to kill some of the bad bugs and the bad things. Interesting. So that's the future of that. Now let's go, because I have two more things, the grounding and the stress. We'll end with stress and how it's hurting you. But grounding, walking, I guess, barefooted on the earth, grass, sand.
Yeah, I'm grounded right now on your TV show. I have a grounded pad. I have bare feet.
Wait, inside of a house? How does that happen?
I don't know if you can see my foot. That's my foot.
Okay, there you go.
And I have a pad, and this pad is plugged into the ground in the wall. And I'm grounded talking to you on computer.
So is it magnetic? What is it?
Well, it's a pad, a grounding pad that connects to the earth. See, the earth is endowed with energy, Randy. We call it the Schumann Resonance. In other words, you know how lightning strikes the equator maybe thousands of times a minute around the equator? I live in Tampa, Florida, and after a thunderstorm, I go outside. I smell that ozone, because Tampa is sort of the lightning capital of the United States. And when I walk out on the grass barefoot, or around the pool on concrete, it's amazing, because you're taking in all this live energy, from lightning strikes. So these lightning strikes create what we call a Schumann resonance. It's like what meditators would say. It's the Om. It's a resonance that is, you can measure it at 7.83 hertz, and that grounding resonance actually feeds the body with electrons. So when you walk barefoot at the beach, for example, or on grass, you are taking in electrons. Now, if you're walking on a tide coming in or a tide going out, and the tide is strong, and you're in that surf, and you're about this deep, right? About 6 inches deep in the surf. And if the tide's coming out, I like that even better, because an outgoing tide can also, drain some of our toxic lymph and take some of the, bad, the bad constituents in our body out with that's energetic medicine. I actually learned that from a bush Indian woman living in Nassau in the Bahamas. But when it comes to earthing and grounding, I'm all in. It's free. It's free. It's the most potent anti-inflammatory around. We did about 20 studies on it. Not only does it lower blood sugar, that was a study done in rats. It thins the blood. When I did this research, yes, one of the problems of the 21st century is that we have red ketchup blood. A lot of it from electromagnetics, from computers, from cordless phones, cellular phones, baby monitors, cell phone towers. All this electromagnetic soup thickens the blood, so we have red ketchup. You want red wine as your blood. You want your blood to be slippery. And what grounding does, it has an impact on what we call zeta potential. It's like being in New York City in a traffic jam. All the cars are stuck. Everything's stuck. That's red ketchup blood. As opposed to being on the Autobahn in Germany where the cars are going like this, back and forth, that's a good zeta potential. So what grounding does, it stimulates the activity between red blood cells, and it makes the red blood cells dance more instead of being clumped. And, when I wrote that paper, Randy, your audience is going to think that I'm pompous or conceited, but in 50 years, that was the greatest research I've ever did in my entire life. I thought this was Nobel Prize material. I submitted it to these great journals. They all turned it down. And then I called this researcher in Sweden, and he's laughing and laughing at me. What are you laughing for? Ollie. It was Ollie Johansson, the big, EMF guy. He goes, you know what? They'll never give that Nobel Prize on that, because none of your doctor colleagues are going to believe this stuff. It's going to take another 10 or 20 years. He was laughing. How many minutes? He made me feel better,
How many minutes a day?
To ground?
Yeah.
I sleep grounded. So I sleep, with a grounded mattress, a grounded sheet. All this stuff you can get on grounded.com if you want. The essence is I have shoes that are grounded. There's various websites you can get grounded.
So there isn't an amount. It's as much as you can do.
As much as you can. And there was a doctor in California, a board-certified cardiologist. I helped him do this study. He looked at 12 patients on multiple antihypertensive drugs, high blood pressure drugs. And he grounded these 12 people for at least 12 hours. In other words, sleeping grounded, using mats at computers, walking grounded, et cetera, at least 12 hours. Do you know what, Randy? Every single one of those patients got off either 3, 2, or at least 1 hypertensive drug. Every single one of them had lowering of blood pressure, simple earthing and grounding. And when you can take somebody off a pharmaceutical drug, or drugs for that matter, just with simple grounding, that's bringing what I call God's simple miracles to the table. God's simple cures. That's the book I want to write someday, by the way.
Look, we're all trying to have more energy, right? That's why little kids, I see 8, 9-year-olds, they run to the car, they run to this, they have all this energy. And as you get older, you get in your 50s, closing in on 60 for me, what ends up happening is, it's like going skiing. It's like, they're going, let's go skiing. Boy, if you'd asked me that 20 years ago, I'm the first one to say, now it's like, I'm already tired before I even get there. I'm going, I've got to rent the skis, I got to do this. So all of this, that means this program that we're talking about today, anti-inflammatory diet, these supplements, grounding, stress reduction, your 6 pillars, everything we're talking about is to increase energy, right? Energy production.
Yes.
Interesting.
That's the chi. That's our chi. That's our prana.
So whether you like to go bowling or hunting or fishing or whatever, it's about energy. Tell me about this, stress. Give me a definition of stress reduction and what stress is.
Stress is, stress is different things to different people. What's stressful to you may not be stressful to me. If you take a college co-ed and she has beautiful fingernails and all of a sudden she breaks a fingernail, to her, that's as stressful as getting a flat tire on the thruway. Okay. You have to measure stress. So in other words, what's one person's poison may be another person's, okayness. You know what I mean? But when it comes to stress, you can't die for it, Randy. That's the key. As a heart specialist, I've seen people die for stress. Let me give you an example. I remember there was a lawyer, not a friend of mine, but basically an acquaintance, and a 16-year-old kid took a key and he keyed his car, and it was a brand new car. And I really felt bad for this guy, but the guy had a heart attack over it. Now, look, please don't have a heart attack because somebody put a line in your car. You can get angry, you can get upset, but when it comes down to stress biochemicals, adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol, being outpoured in the body, and if you have a little bit of silent arrhythmia or you have a little high blood pressure at the same time, and now you're pouring out these stress biochemicals, this can be a recipe.
So I understand this correctly. So these adrenaline, these stress hormones, cortisol, things like that, are they vasoconstrictors? I mean, do they constrict the arteries? I mean, what's the mechanism that's causing that sudden cardiac event?
They drive up blood pressure, and basically they can have a negative impact on potassium relationships in the body. They can lower potassium, which can render the heart to go out of rhythm, and they can cause vasoconstriction from all these release of biochemicals. It's like driving your car with your brakes on. Think about that. When a person gets so angry that the best thing they can do is have their anger out, not rage. Rage can be uncontrollable. You can hurt somebody in rage. But if you want to have healthy anger, if you want to, let's say, punch a pillow or kick the door or yell in your car, that's okay with me. I don't have a problem with that. The best thing for intense anger, because anger can lead to sadness, and that's the point I want to make. If you have sadness, release the sadness. Cry. Crying is the best thing you can do to release the heartbreak we've all had that will lead to heart disease. And crying is a way of discharging good stress biochemicals. When we cry, we put out endorphins through our eyes, through our tears. We release what we call the thromboxane A2 in the lung, which causes blood clotting, especially when we sob. And when we cry, we free up the frozen chest that we have, the rigid chest that, we clamp down, and basically crying involuntarily frees up the whole body. And it's the best thing for saving your heart.
But easier said than done. Like some people, I think you told me a little bit about this on our conversation. The people that cry, like during movies or cry whatever, are healthier or they live longer.
Yes. See,
really,
when people go to a movie and the movie makes them cry, they said, "Oh, Dr. Sinatra, I went to this movie and it made me cry." No, it didn't make you cry. All the movie did was touch the sadness that we all have. And that particular scene, that particular act, that particular portion of the movie touched an inner memory in you, an inner sadness in you. And when that's touched and you let it happen, now you're releasing this trapped energy. And now I'm talking like a psychotherapist. When this trapped energy gets released, the heart thrives. The heart does not thrive on trapped energy. The heart thrives on pulsation. Even prehistoric man knew that pulsation was really the essence of living or dying. So if you want your heart to have a more vibratory capacity, you want to discharge the body of emotional stress as the best you can, and crying is the best way to do it. We reported that stuff in the literature, by the way. We wrote papers on this showing that.
By the way, most of the things we're talking about can be said for the brain as well. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, the heart and the brain are connected through the vagus nerve and through a lot of neurohormonal connections. But as a heart specialist, I've always believed that the heart trumps the brain. Definitely trumps the brain.
Let's talk about stress for a moment as far as sleep. So I know this CEO, good friend of mine, he brags about 5 hours sleep. He said, "Randy, some people only need 5 hours." But is that stress? Does that raise stress hormones? And
if he's getting good 5 hours, if he has some REM, he has some dreams in there, and the dreams aren't terrifying, but he does dream, and he tries to recall his dreams. 5 hours would be that sort of my lower limit of normal. I mean, I know a lot of people like that who sleep, 5-6 hours straight. They don't wake up, and that's better than sleeping 8 or 9 hours by waking up 4 or 5 times, going to the bathroom, just waking up. If you can get 4 to 5 hours of restful sleep in this day and age, with melatonin decreasing in the brain because of all the EMF soup in the environment and all that stuff, I mean, to me, that's nirvana. 4 or 5 hours of restful sleep is good. We used to think 8 or 9 was good. Right now, we need 4 to 5 of good, healthy sleep. That'll work.
So the other new normal is everybody's looking at their phones, and there's a lot of light going in. And some of the research that I've read says that it could actually blunt, melatonin production, and you don't sleep very well. And I got these blue blocker glasses, which I like. A lot of you guys are doing them. I want to know your stance on blue blockers. And is it a good idea for everybody to get these blue blockers, especially if they're looking at their phones in the evening or watching TV?
Yeah, it's a very good point. I would suggest it. I mean, the more you don't use a computer at night or your cell phone at night, or the more you don't watch television just before bedtime, I think people that do a little ritual before bed, especially in the dark, whether they say a prayer or do a little reading by a dim light. And I know people that wear glasses even while reading, in the blue light, that helps. But the important thing here is that you're absolutely right. The more light that you take into your eyes at night, this inhibits natural melatonin production in the body. And because of the environment, that melatonin is suppressed. Randy, I know researchers and other doctors that take up to 15 milligrams, 15 milligrams of melatonin at night, when 5 years ago, a half a milligram to 1 milligram was the norm. I personally take 6 milligrams at night before I go to bed because it does help me with at least 3 or 4 hours of nice restful sleep.
Okay, now what about another thing for the heart? Aged garlic pills.
They're
what
okay.
are your thoughts on it? Some people speak like it's a miracle. I was speaking to the co-chair of the A4M, the anti-aging, Laval, and the education. Yeah. He loves it.
Hey, look, as long as it's a nice organic garlic, and I think they are, and basically, I like garlic. I mean, garlic brings a lot to the table. Look, during World War II, garlic was Russian penicillin. Garlic kills microbes. It kills parasites. It kills viruses. Even in this pandemic that we're in, I mean, certainly I would use garlic. I mean, garlic is fine. I mean, onions are fine. Onions contain quercetin, and that's one of the greatest, flavonoids that I like, particularly in this pandemic. So, garlic and onions, all part of the Mediterranean diet. Love it.
Okay, good. What are your 6 pillars of health?
Well, the first pillar is basically a healthy Mediterranean non-inflammatory diet. Second pillar is exercise. And exercise doesn't have to be pumping iron. You can be walking a dog, riding a bicycle, just taking walks, leisurely walks, at least a half hour a day. I do a little light weights in the morning. I like it. My third pillar, I take targeted nutritional supplements. I take them every day. I do detoxification maneuvers. When I work out in my basement and I break a sweat, I'll go into a far infrared sauna. Randy, remember, a lot of the biochemicals that are in our body, the harmful biochemicals, they're in a subcutaneous layer of our skin. So sweating is wonderful for you because when you sweat, you're sweating out chemicals, petrochemicals, certainly heavy metals. Heavy metals can come out in your sweat. So sweating is one of the healthiest things you can do. And I think one of the reasons why I'm sort of blessed as an adult, all through my high school career and my college career, I wrestled Division I. And I think all the sweating I did, in athletics for several years, I think I got rid of a lot of toxins because I had a lot of mercury put in my mouth by dentists, at a very early age. And I think sweating is one of the healthiest things we can do. Now, you can take milk thistle to support the liver. I recommend that during the pandemic, for example. I love milk thistle. You can certainly take artichoke, which I mentioned before. I really like artichoke. So you want to support the liver. If you want to do cleansing enemas, I see no problem with that. Certainly taking a lot of fiber. We talked a little bit about fiber previously. I do a drink at night with psyllium fiber. I add psyllium fiber, and I use my Healthy Directions powdered vitamin because it has pomegranate in it and vitamin C and vitamin D. And I'll mix that with probiotics and prebiotics, and I take that every night before bedtime. Just because I believe in bowel cleansing as a way of detoxification. So that's detox. Grounding we talked about. Grounding is another.
Now with the detox, is it true there are certain foods that leach heavy metals or leach toxins out of your body, like cabbage or things like that?
Yeah, the nitric oxide foods are good. Cabbage is really good. Sulforaphane and broccoli is good. I really liked some of the seaweeds. They pull out alginates. Basically, they can pull radiation. These alginates can pull radiation out of the body. So if you have a pure seaweed, the ones that are grown on the Maine coast, for example, up there, or in the northern Atlantic, I'm a little worried about some of the seaweeds in the Pacific. The Korean seaweeds allegedly are still good. They test them over there, so they're okay. But like seaweeds are good because you want to detoxify the body, and particularly, hey, look, nobody needs radiation in the body. Let's face it, especially with all these nuclear accidents on the planet.
So okay, so this could be a big negative if you're against it. Red wine. Okay.
Well, no, I mean,
it seems like some doctors, if they like red wine, they say it's okay. 2 glasses a day, 2 4-ounce glasses. Some guys that aren't drinkers, they just say 0 wine. You don't want alcohol ever. What is your stance on this?
I agree with both. If you're a non-drinker, I wouldn't start drinking wine. Okay. In other words, why do it? Okay. There's so many other healthy ways of taking in resveratrol or quercetin or, in the body. I mean, look, the French have the lowest incidence of heart disease in Western Europe, but the average French cholesterol is over 270.
I didn't know that.
The French, we call it the French paradox. You know why? Because the French eat pâtés, lots of fats. They eat, all these gravies and stuff like that, and they're loaded with fat in their diet. But what do the French do? They drink red wine mostly, some white wine, but mostly red wine. So the French have the lowest incidence of heart disease in Europe, but they have the highest incidence of cirrhosis in the world. Okay. So by drinking red wine on a daily basis, and a lot of these sommeliers, and I've spoken to some of these sommeliers, they drink wine from age 8 on, age 8 years old, where they develop their palates. So when they're in their 20s, they become very good at it and very famous at it. But over time, the liver is very susceptible to alcohol. I mean, they've done studies on this, even in prisoners, taking an ounce of vodka a day can hurt the liver. So, over time. So basically, if you like red wine, moderation is key, 4 to 5 times a week, a couple of glasses a day.
So what's worse in the wine, the sugar or the alcohol?
I would say both. Okay. I would say both. Remember, alcohol is sugar, Randy. Alcohol breaks down the sugar.
So in the liver,
that's why beer, maltose, has a higher glycemic index than glucose, so to speak. Maltose is in beer.
That's the beer belly.
It's a beer belly. You got it.
So one more thing about wine. I have to endorse this company. It's called Dry Farms Wine. I don't know if you've heard of it, but this Dry Farms wine in a whole bottle has 2 grams of sugar. And they independently test this. In 1 glass, it has 0.002 grams of sugar. And it's called Dry Farms. And what they do is they starve out these grapes. It's these organic growers, very small sulfites, and apparently by starving them out, it doesn't produce as much fruit. So I've been in on this for now 6 months. When I first started drinking it, it tasted almost like vinegar. And now it tastes like great wine. And when I drink regular wine, it tastes like I'm drinking a sugar bomb. So if you haven't tried Dry Farms, there's other names.
Oh, I'd like to try it. Yeah, I'd like to try
it. Dry Farms, it is phenomenal.
My son is involved with Free Spirit wine in California. All biodynamic, all organic, but
less than a gram of sugar per glass.
Yeah, I got to check that. Can you email that to me?
Yes. Yeah, I will. I'll do that. I
will definitely look at it because, hey, listen, if I can learn from you, this is the greatest thing about being a doctor. Everybody's my messenger. My patients are my messengers. Randy, the good doctors listen to their patients because when the patients get well, even if it's not your recipe, but their recipe, and they're willing to share it with you, that's how doctors get better. They learn from their patients. If I just learned something from you about this wine with lower alcohol and lower sugar, I'm all in. I'd like to try it.
I interviewed you on the phone briefly, but it seems like all the integrative doctors that are just not drugs and surgery mentality, they all seem to have this epiphany or turning point like you did, where you saw a patient get better naturally, like Gundry's another one, here he's a heart transplant guy, sees a patient that, gets his calcium score down to almost 0, and he quits what he's doing and studies nutrition. And this kind of goes, is this very common amongst your colleagues and friends? They have to actually see it themselves to believe it?
Yeah. In other words, I think once you see the light, so to speak, and once you get the notion of what people really need to get healed, then you develop your own style. And see, here's the problem, Randy. If you go to 5 different doctors, you're going to get 5 different opinions. This is what your listeners need to do. They need to go to one doctor, one specialist, or one internist that they can trust and follow their advice. Because if you go to multiple doctors, you're going to get multiple opinions. You're going to create a lot of buzz in your mind, a lot of confusion in your mind, and that's not good for anybody. Find the one doctor you trust and follow their style, and you'll be in good shape.
Now, I had a friend, my friend Robert. He's financially set. He feels like an educated guy. He goes, I just went to the best cardiologist, right? And because he had some cholesterol issues. And I said afterwards, he goes, he's the best. I mean, this guy's great. I go, did he ever ask you what you're eating? He says, why? And I'm going to tell you what he said. He goes, why the hell would he ask me what I'm eating? I said, well, the guy can't be too good of a doctor if he doesn't even care about what you eat. But you must hear that a lot.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Some doctors are married totally to the pharmaceutical industry. That's the doctor I would probably tell your listeners not to embrace. I think the best doctors have their foot in both camps. In other words, they look at alternative medicine. They still have their foot in conventional medicine. But I think the best doctors blend those two worlds together, and we call that integrative medicine. And that's basically a lot of the doctors that I hang out with and I lecture with. We're integrative specialists, and we learn from one another. And basically, hey, when it comes to healing the body, if anything works, there's not one size that fits all. And the good doctor will find the right combination, working with the patient. Remember I said before, they do this dance together. A lot of it is on unconscious levels where they do this dance, where they come together. But the best doctors work with their patients to find the secret remedies. And all you want to do is have your patients thrive. My best patients, I would say to them, see me in 1 to 5 years. That's what I would say to my patients. If you get ill, call me anytime. But if you're healthy, see me in 1 to 5 years.
That's nice. Good. Do you think people are going to start living to about 100 years old, 120, 115 routinely?
Well, that's sort of the message that's given out by the A4M, living longer. Yes, I mean, there are we talked about certain constituents that can prolong telomeres, telomere length we didn't talk about. There's certainly nutraceuticals that can downregulate mTOR. I'm sure you've had doctors on your show that have talked about autography and mTOR. These are the new buzzwords going forward. And things like green tea, for example, quercetin that's found in onions. We talked about resveratrol. You mentioned turmeric. In other words, things like this can downregulate mTOR. And whenever you do that, you are giving the body the basis for aging longer. We talked about the Mediterranean diet, where there's more 100-year-old people in the Mediterranean basin. So I think that if your listeners took in a non-inflammatory diet, followed my 6 pillars, did some grounding, took some supplements, did some detoxification, I think, we can be like an average Mediterranean. Instead of living to an average of 78.6 years in America, we can live to 87.7 years in the Mediterranean, and maybe in the next decade get another 10 years, and maybe another decade, another 10 years after that. So I don't know, but I do believe that with the Biogenome Project, that right now we have an ace in the hole going forward studying genetics, and I think we'll live longer. Now, look, we went back a year with COVID. I'll tell you that. We've lost a year of longevity in America because of this viral illness. So, we just got to get past COVID, and hopefully the average age band for an American male will be 80 years old in the next 2 or 3 years in America.
So look, I've had medical doctors on this show that used to be traditional mainstream. Got people like Dr. Terry Walls. She believes that she cured her or reversed her Parkinson's. Do you think those kind of diseases will be reversed more and more? And do you also think that, like Bredesen, who wrote the book The End of Alzheimer's, curing it with nutrition, do you think that that's what's really going to come to light? That food truly is medicine?
I think there's going to be some superstars in the field of healing. And a lot of these superstars are going to be board certified in conventional medicine, therapies. In other words, I think the best doctors are the ones that have gone through the conventional training, became board certified in their specialties, and then learned alternative medicine along the way. And once you bring those, like Bredesen, for example, I was at a meeting where I didn't know about AHCC. I didn't know about that specific mushroom preparation that he used. And I'm sitting in the audience, and he taught me something. And I started to use AHCC, myself. I like it. I've always believed in, mushrooms and immunity, but I never had a brand that he endorsed. And I liked it, and I take it now. In fact, I take a capsule of AHCC whenever I go outdoors to a supermarket or anything like that, especially in COVID. I added that to my vitamin D and my zinc and my quercetin and my CoQ10 and stuff like that. So I learned from other doctors, and I think it's wonderful that I can learn because I'm always learning.
People see the vitamins I'll take. It's like a handful. And my girlfriend says, she goes, God, all those supplements. And I said, well, I see you eat, 20 almonds, at a time. It's like really not that much when you're, think about it. I mean, what you eat a little handful of a day. So you probably take more than 10 supplements a day, 15 supplements a day.
Oh, yeah. I take supplements in the morning. I take them before bed. I'll take them after dinner. I use digestive enzymes a lot now. I'll tell you why. After every meal, I take digestive enzymes because there's been a skyrocketing increase in pancreatic cancer. And I even lost my best friend from college. He was captain of our football team, my fraternity brother. I lost him 5 years ago. And I was giving him pancreatic enzymes. And when I was researching pancreatic cancer, oh my God, it's really increasing. And again, even Steve Jobs, I mean, bless his heart, he developed, the whole, computer industry. And I got to believe those computers that he used in his late 30s were at probably the level of his, his abdomen. Because it's very unusual, very, very unusual, Randy, for somebody to develop pancreatic cancer in their late 30s, early 40s. And I got to believe that electromagnetics or a toxic environment had something to do with it. From let's say computer microwaves. I mean, that's my intuitive hit. But what I'm trying to say here is that supplements in this day and age should be taken more than ever because whether it's magnesium because the soils are depleted, or vitamin D because it'll help, prevent COVID, or CoQ10 because it supports endothelial function, or zinc because it acts like hydroxychloroquine. I mean, Randy, I could go on. The list goes on and on and on. And, it just makes sense to take targeted nutritional supports, especially in this toxic environment we live in. So I'm all in when it comes to those.
Great.
And I do take samples of antioxidants.
Good for you. Good for you. What about, this is such a big topic, what about these powdered green drinks, powdered red drinks? Is it dead? Is it still alive? Is it a compound that we can actually use? I'm like, if you have a big, a quality green drink powder, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Some of these powders are really good. I've used them myself. I mean, I especially, like I said before, when I go to the supermarket, I go to the organic section only, and I just make that salad. See, you can buy these ready-made salads, and you get a good expiration date that has cabbage, kale, carrots. In other words, all these different vegetables that are in a salad mix. You add those to your organic lettuce and your organic onions and your avocados, and you add the fruits I mentioned. It's amazing. A salad like that has all those micronutrients, the colors of a rainbow, so to speak. And I like that. Now, whether you want to get that stuff in juicing, if you want to juice fresh fruits and vegetables, you can. If you want to take these vitamins and minerals you see on television, these Juice Plus situations, I don't see a problem with that. I don't see a problem at all. I think it's all good. I do like fresh fruits and vegetables, and the fresher, the better. Okay. And again, that's why I like them in their whole state, because I want the fiber. In other words, when I have that salad that I make, I'm getting a ton of fiber in that salad as well. I mean, people don't realize there's lots of fiber in avocado. I mean, it's amazing. And you get, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries. There's an enormous amount of polyphenols and carotenoids, in these berries. And Just remember this. You must, if you use peaches, apples, and strawberries, you must get those organic because those are the most heavily sprayed. So don't take those in the conventional route. I like peaches. Peaches bring a lot to the table, but if they're sprayed, they're I'm out on them. So
do you believe I'm wrong? Do you believe I'm wrong on
this conversation? Huh?
Go ahead.
I think the most important words to our conversation over this last hours and a half or so is we want our listeners to be productive without being self-destructive, like I said before. That's the key, Randy. We want to empower them. We want to energize them. We want to get them to take the road better traveled for health and be productive. Just be productive. Omit the bad guys, take in the good guys. And I think, we'll all get good health and happiness going forward.
Dr. Sinatra, fantastic. Thank you for coming on the program. We're going to go to a quick break. If you could stay on, because I'd like to talk to you for a few seconds. You've been watching the Wellness Hour, news that makes you healthier. I'm Randy Alvarez. For now, I wish you good health.